In the spring of 2024, something happened in the skies over the Middle East that most analysts described as a military failure. Iran launched over 300 drones and ballistic missiles at Israel, the largest direct missile attack from one nation-state against another in modern history, and almost all of them were intercepted, shot down, destroyed in midair before they ever reached their targets. The headlines the next morning were clear. Iran had been humiliated. Its arsenal had been neutralized. Its decades of investment in ballistic missiles had been rendered useless in a single night by air defense systems and a coalition of nations working in coordinated precision. That is the story everyone saw. Now here is the problem. Because if you actually know how Iran's missile program works, if you understand the doctrine, the geography, the engineering philosophy behind what Tehran has been building underground for the last 30 years, then what happened that night was not a failure at all. It was a test. And not a test for Israel, a test for the United States, a probe, a calibration exercise designed to answer one very specific question. And the Americans knew it. Now here is where things get interesting. Because the U.S. response to what Iran has been building underground, the tunnels, the silos, the hardened bunkers that go down hundreds of meters into solid rock, that response was not a missile defense system. It was not a sanctions package. It was not a diplomatic ultimatum. It was a bomb. A very specific bomb. One that most people have never heard of. One that was kept secret for years. One that the Pentagon only acknowledged publicly after the question of Iran's underground fortifications became impossible to ignore. And what that bomb can do, what it was designed specifically to do, changes the entire calculus of the Middle East. But here is the question nobody is asking. If the United States has a weapon capable of destroying hardened underground missile sites, and Iran knows this, then why does Iran keep building them? Why does Iran keep digging deeper? Why does Tehran keep investing in underground infrastructure when the weapon designed to destroy that infrastructure already exists? Stay with that question, because the answer reveals something that neither Washington nor Tehran wants to say out loud. To understand what Iran has been building, you need to go back to the 1980s, the Iran-Iraq War. 8 years of brutal, grinding, attritional warfare that killed somewhere between 500,000 and 1 million people, and taught the Iranian military a lesson that has shaped every strategic decision they have made since. The lesson was simple. If your military assets are visible, they will be destroyed. Iraq, with help from Western intelligence, found Iranian air bases, artillery positions, and supply depots, and bombed them into rubble. Iran's air force, equipped with American F-14s from the Shah era, was gradually degraded because it needed runways, hangars, maintenance facilities, all visible, all targetable. So after the war ended, Iran made a decision. It would go underground. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, began building what military analysts now call one of the most extensive underground military infrastructure programs in the world. They called their tunnel networks the City of Missiles. And that name is not metaphorical. These are not bunkers. They are not storage rooms. They are operational launch facilities, built inside mountains, with reinforced concrete tunnels wide enough to drive trucks through, with independent power supplies, ventilation systems, command and control infrastructure, and, this is the critical part, the missiles already loaded on mobile launchers, ready to fire from inside the tunnel and then retract back underground before a counterstrike can locate the launch point. Think about what that means strategically. It means Iran has missiles that from the moment of launch to the moment they return underground are exposed for perhaps 2 to 3 minutes. Finding them, targeting them, and destroying them in that window with conventional strike assets is essentially impossible. By the mid-2000s, American defense analysts estimated Iran had over 500 kilometers of these tunnels. By 2020, that number had likely doubled. Some assessments suggest Iran has moved virtually its entire medium and long-range ballistic missile arsenal underground. That is the problem. Now here is where the story changes. Because the United States, watching this happen in real time through satellite imagery and intelligence collection, began working on its own answer. And that answer has a name: the Massive Ordnance Penetrator, the MOP, officially designated the GBU-57, a bomb that weighs 30,000 pounds, 15 tons, and is designed to burrow through 60 meters of reinforced concrete before detonating. It is the largest non-nuclear bomb in the American arsenal. It is so large, it can only be carried by one aircraft in the world, the B-2 Spirit stealth bomber, and the United States has only 20 of those. Okay, now think about this. The United States spent roughly $330 million developing this weapon. They built it specifically, explicitly, publicly, for one purpose: to destroy hardened underground nuclear and missile facilities. In a country that begins with the letter I. The Pentagon has never officially said Iran, but it has never not said Iran either. So we have Iran building the most elaborate underground missile complex in history, and the United States developing the only weapon capable of reaching it. That sounds like deterrence. That sounds like the system working. But something doesn't add up. Let me introduce you to a concept that military strategists call escalation dominance. The idea is straightforward. In any conflict, there are multiple rungs on a ladder of escalation. Whoever can credibly threaten to climb to the next rung, and whoever can credibly survive the other side climbing to the next rung, that country controls the conflict. You do not need to actually climb the ladder. You just need your adversary to believe you will if pushed. The United States has historically dominated this ladder against most adversaries. America has more nuclear weapons, more conventional strike capacity, more global basing, more naval power, more air power than any other nation on Earth. But here is the problem with escalation dominance against Iran specifically. Iran has studied the United States very carefully, and it has identified three things about America that constrain American escalation in ways that constrain almost no other great power. First, the American public. Wars are expensive in blood and treasure. After Iraq and Afghanistan, the political appetite in the United States for a major ground conflict in the Middle East is essentially zero. Iran knows this. Iranian strategic doctrine is built around it. Second, the global economy. Iran sits at the mouth of the Strait of Hormuz. Between 20 and 30% of the world's seaborne oil passes through that strait. Any serious military conflict with Iran carries the risk of that strait being mined, blocked, or made too dangerous to navigate. The resulting oil price shock would be felt in every economy on Earth. That is leverage. That is deterrence of a different kind. Third, and this is the one that most analysts underestimate, Israel. The United States will do almost anything to prevent a military conflict from becoming an existential threat to Israel. Iran understands that this creates a ceiling on how far the United States can push, because any push that triggers Iranian retaliation against Israel creates domestic political consequences in Washington that constrain future American action. So what Iran has done, deliberately, systematically, over 30 years, is build a deterrence architecture that specifically targets American domestic politics, American economic interdependencies, and American regional commitments. The underground missiles are not just a military asset, they are a geopolitical instrument. They are designed to make the cost of American military action against Iran unacceptably high. Now I want you to sit with that for a moment, because this means the real conflict is not about missiles at all. The real conflict is about what military theorists call the decision calculus, the internal calculation that happens inside government, sometimes consciously, sometimes not, about whether the expected benefits of military action outweigh the expected costs and risks. Iran has spent 3 decades engineering the American decision calculus to produce a specific answer. The answer is, not yet, not now. The price is too high. And then the United States developed the MOP. And here is where the third player enters the story. I want you to think about who benefits most from the Iran-US standoff. Not Israel. Israel lives under the shadow of Iranian missiles. Whatever leverage Israel gains from being the implied justification for American deterrence, it is not worth the existential anxiety of knowing that Iran could, on any given night, attempt to saturate Israeli air defenses with more missiles than the Iron Dome and Arrow systems can intercept simultaneously. Not the Gulf states. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar. They host American military bases. They buy American weapon systems. They are in the blast radius of any serious regional conflict. Not Europe. Europe imports significant amounts of Middle Eastern energy. A Gulf conflict is an economic catastrophe for European economies still recovering from the post-COVID and Ukraine-related energy disruptions. So who actually benefits from a world in which the United States and Iran are locked in a permanent, expensive, destabilizing standoff that neither side can resolve? Think about it. China. And I want you to understand how specifically, how precisely China benefits. Because it is not the obvious answer you might assume. The obvious answer is that the United States is distracted. Resources, attention, political capital, military assets, all tied up managing the Middle East. That is true, but it is not the most important benefit. The more important benefit is this. China is in the middle of the most ambitious military modernization program in the history of the People's Republic. It is expanding its nuclear arsenal. It is building hardened underground facilities of its own. Facilities that look, to American defense planners, remarkably similar to Iran's underground missile complexes. China has been watching very carefully how the United States develops, deploys, and uses the tools it intends to use against underground, hardened targets. Every test flight of the B-2 carrying the MOP is intelligence. Every public discussion of penetration capability is intelligence. Every American negotiation with Iran about underground nuclear facilities tells China something about where American red lines actually are and how far underground you need to go to stay beneath the threshold of American action. In other words, Iran has been, intentionally or not, the test case, the live experiment, the adversary that has forced the United States to develop and reveal its doctrine, its capabilities, and its limitations for dealing with exactly the kind of underground hardened military infrastructure that China is now building for itself. That should make you deeply uncomfortable. Because it means that the billions of dollars the United States has spent developing the massive ordnance penetrator, refining its doctrine for use, and debating its deployment openly in congressional testimony and defense publications, all of that has been essentially a free intelligence service for the People's Liberation Army. Remember that, because it becomes important later. Let me give you the framework that explains all of this. The first concept is what strategists call information asymmetry. In any negotiation or conflict, one side usually knows more than the other. The side with more information can exploit that advantage. But here is the twist. Revealing your capabilities, showing your opponent what you know, what you can do, what weapons you have, can actually reduce your advantage. The moment you show Iran that the MOP exists and can reach their tunnels, Iran begins adapting, digging deeper, reinforcing harder, dispersing assets more widely. The information you revealed to deter Iran also taught Iran how to be harder to deter. The second concept is attrition theory. In a long conflict, both sides spend resources, militaries, economies, political capital. The side that can sustain attrition longer wins. Iran has been playing an attrition game against American policy for over 40 years. Sanctions, proxy conflicts, diplomatic isolation, nuclear negotiations. Each round costs both sides something. But Iran has concluded, perhaps correctly, that it can absorb the cost longer than American domestic politics can sustain the pressure. The third concept is cognitive warfare. This is newer, and it is more important than most people realize. Cognitive warfare is not about destroying your enemy's weapons. It is about destroying your enemy's will to use them. It is about shaping what your adversary believes to be true, possible, or acceptable. Iran's missile display, those 300 drones and missiles, was not primarily a kinetic operation. It was a cognitive operation. It was designed to communicate a specific message. We have more than you think. We can reach further than you think, and we are willing to use them. The goal was not to destroy Israeli military infrastructure. The goal was to reshape Israeli and American decision-making about what risks are acceptable. The fourth concept is strategic depth. Iran is a country of 88 million people, roughly the size of Alaska. It has mountains, deserts, multiple climate zones, and a terrain that makes it extraordinarily difficult to operate in militarily. Its population is concentrated in cities, but its military infrastructure is dispersed across terrain that makes targeting extraordinarily complex. Strategic depth is the advantage of size and geography. It means that even a successful strike campaign against Iran would likely not destroy Iran's military capacity. It would disperse it, harden it, and radicalize the population in ways that make follow-on operations even more costly. And the fifth concept, the one that ties all of this together, is what theorists call the security dilemma. When one country builds weapons to feel secure, its adversary feels less secure and builds more weapons in response. Each round of buildup makes both sides less secure than they were before. The MOP was built to deter Iran. Iran, seeing the MOP, digs deeper and builds more missiles. The deeper missiles and more numerous missiles push the United States to develop an even more capable penetrating munition. There are already reports of a next-generation version. And so the cycle continues, each round more expensive, each round more destabilizing, and neither side meaningfully safer than when the cycle started. Now I want to challenge everything I just told you, because there is a strong case, a genuinely strong case, that I have been wrong. The steelman argument goes like this. The United States strategy is working. The fact that Iran has not used its missiles in an all-out assault, has not attempted to close the Strait of Hormuz, has not provided its proxy forces with the most capable systems in its arsenal, that is not evidence of Iranian patience or Iranian strategy. That is evidence of American deterrence succeeding. The MOP, the presence of U.S. carrier strike groups in the region, the permanent American military footprint in Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait, and the UAE. These things have created a ceiling on Iranian behavior. Iran has not used its most dangerous capabilities because it knows what comes next if it does. And the April 2024 missile and drone attack actually proves this case rather than undermining it. Iran launched 300 projectiles and achieved essentially nothing. Its most advanced ballistic missiles were intercepted. Its drones were neutralized. The world saw, in real time, in high definition, that American and allied air defense systems can stop Iran's arsenal. That is not a failure of American strategy. That is American strategy demonstrating itself. Furthermore, the argument goes, the underground missiles are actually a sign of Iranian weakness, not strength. A country that has to hide its most important military assets underground, that has to operate in permanent secrecy, that cannot openly move its most capable systems without fear of being destroyed from the air, that country is operating from a position of strategic inferiority, not strength. And China? China's observation of American capabilities is not a reason to conceal those capabilities. Transparency about American power is itself a deterrent. Showing China what the MOP can do, showing China that the United States has the B-2 and the will to use it, is itself a message, not a threat, a signal. And signals are the currency of great power deterrence. That is the strongest counter-argument. And I want to be honest, it is not wrong. But here is where it breaks down. Deterrence works when all sides share a rational actor model, when both sides calculate costs and benefits in roughly similar ways, when both sides have something to lose that they value more than the thing they are trying to gain. That model fits the US-Soviet Cold War reasonably well. Two superpowers, mutually assured destruction, clear red lines, direct communication channels. It fits Iran much less cleanly. Iran's leadership has on multiple occasions signaled a willingness to absorb costs that a pure rational actor model would say no state would voluntarily accept. The 8-year war with Iraq, the sustained economic pain of sanctions, the willingness to fund proxy forces across 4 countries simultaneously despite the domestic economic consequences. These are not the behaviors of a state that calculates costs and benefits the same way American strategic planners do. And if your deterrence theory rests on an assumption about your adversary's decision calculus that the adversary has repeatedly demonstrated is wrong, then your deterrence theory is built on sand. So where does this leave us? And more importantly, what should you be watching? The first thing to watch is the penetrating munitions program. There are credible reports, buried in defense budget documents, in congressional testimony, in think tank papers that get very little mainstream coverage, that the United States is developing a next-generation bunker buster, something more capable than the MOP, something potentially capable of reaching targets that are currently considered hardened beyond the reach of conventional weapons. If that program accelerates, if you see budget increases, if you see test flights of the B-2 with unusual payloads, if you see public statements from senior defense officials about conventional deterrence against hardened targets, that tells you something important about where American strategic planning is heading. The second thing to watch is Iranian tunnel construction. Open-source satellite imagery, particularly from commercial providers like Planet Labs and Maxar, has gotten extraordinarily good. Iranian underground construction projects are visible, not the tunnels themselves, but the spoil, the equipment, the access roads, the power infrastructure that surrounds them. If Iran is digging deeper, digging faster, or digging in new locations, that will be visible. And it will tell you how seriously Iran is taking the threat from American penetrating munitions. The third thing to watch, and this is the one that almost nobody is watching, is the Chinese construction program in Xinjiang and Gansu province. China has been building hardened underground missile facilities at a pace that has alarmed American defense planners. The designs of those facilities, the depth, the reinforcement, the dispersal patterns, have evolved in ways that suggest China has been paying very close attention to everything the United States has revealed through the Iran confrontation about what American bunker-busting capabilities can and cannot reach. If Chinese underground construction suddenly changes, if you see them going deeper, adding additional hardening, changing access patterns, that means China has received new intelligence about American capabilities, either through espionage or through the open-source laboratory of the US-Iran standoff. And that matters more than anything happening with Iran itself. Because here is the uncomfortable truth. The United States has spent decades and billions of dollars in a confrontation with Iran that has, as its most significant strategic effect, educated and informed the one country that American defense planners actually lose sleep over. The country that has the economy, the technology base, the nuclear arsenal, the naval capacity, and the geographic reach to actually contest American global primacy. And that country, watching from a careful distance, taking careful notes, building its own mountains, has not fired a single shot. Here is the question I want to leave you with. In great power competition, the most dangerous thing is not the adversary who challenges you openly. It is the adversary who watches you fight someone else and learns everything about how you fight, how you think, where your limits are, and how deep they need to dig to be beyond your reach. Iran built its missiles under a mountain. The United States built a bomb to reach them. And somewhere, someone is watching both of them, watching very carefully, taking very detailed notes, and building something that neither the mountain nor the bomb was ever designed to stop. The real question is not whether the MOP can reach Iran's tunnels. The real question is, what happens when the next adversary's tunnels are 3 times as deep and the weapon designed to reach them doesn't exist yet?